Hello, everyone. I'm trying to put us on YouTube live. Okay, I think it's working. Good morning. Yes, okay. Okay. Good morning, 9:31. It's Neuroccino, and it's time to talk about some cool science. And today, Eduardo will present us a paper. Did you send it in the chat? You're muted.
Of course, I'm muted. Yes, I send it again so that everyone.
Okay, so you can start. I think you can also share the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the paper I wanted to present you today is a paper from a year ago or so, and it's a behavioral and computational experiment on object and data recognition. So the hypothesis behind this experiment is whether letter recognition is a thing by learning like specialized features, letter features, or by using general visual properties of our cognitive system. So basically, do our cognitive system specialize for letter recognition, or does it carry out this task just by using the resources it will use for any kind of object recognition? And as I mentioned, it's a behavioral computational approach. Why? Because they use behavioral measure and also computational measure. So basically, they collected from human participant measure of perceptual similarities for letters in two different tasks, visual search and a letter recognition task. And they also trained a couple of convolutional neural networks on letter categorization and on object categorization. What they then tested is whether the representational dissimilarity matrices from the behavioral task and the convolutional neural networks were more similar for the convolutional networks trained on letter categorization or on object categorization. And the results are pretty surprising because apparently the human behavior is more close to the represented in the convolutional neural network trained only on images rather than on the network trained only on letters. So, but let's dive a little bit more into the details. The task they used is, as I mentioned, a visual search. So basically, the participant was shown like a screen with a cross fixation, and they had to press was presented a mask, and they had to recognize in which place was presented the odd letter. So, for example, this A among 5 Bs, and they extracted the representational dissimilarity matrices for this kind of behavior, and then they compared it to the convolutional neural networks. As you can see, the letter train network, actually the object train network was much more close to, in terms of correlation, was much more close to the matrices of the human behavior than the letter one. So basically, specific behavior in humans, like letter recognition, was more close to the behavior of the network in object recognition. The same went for the letter categorization task, in which the subject had basically just to respond if a certain stimulus, target stimulus was presented, like letter A, a different letter was presented, and the subject just had to respond yes or no. Even in this case, the object trained neural network was more closely correlated to human behavior than the latter trained neural network. To exclude various different possibilities, they actually also try to modify the neural networks a little bit. So, for example, they tested the three different other possibilities. They're trying to alter the convolutional neural network trained for objects. Let's see if I can catch the image. Here it is. So basically, they try to take the convolutional neural network trained for letter and to then train it also with few images to see if this would improve the correlation with the human behavior. It did, but not much. And another things they tried is to build different neural networks on the different layer of the object trained neural network. So for the layers 1 to 5, they built another convolutional neural network of 5 layers to see if this would improve the correlation between the model, the letter model, and the human behavior. It, in this case, it didn't. The only alternative that led to similar results to the object trained convolutional neural networks was to identify a sort of letter preferring subspace and test whether if there was a subset of features in the convolutional neural network that would be able to respond similarly to the object trained convolutional neural network. So the conclusion they draw on this paper is that, on this data, is that probably specialized letter representations are not necessary for letter recognition in human behavior, and probably that the perception of this object of letters is rely mainly on domain general visual features that are used for any other kind of object recognition. Now, I tried to make the presentation as short as possible because I'm not very much an expert on neural networks, so I wanted to have your opinion on it. But I found it interesting for for the actual results, first of all, and also because it seems like a reasonable way to use neural networks to investigate human cognition in general.
Okay. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Does anyone have any questions or comments? If not, yeah, okay, Chris, go.
Yeah, thank you for presenting this paper. It's really interesting. What are well, you said that you're not expert in the machine learning aspect, but what would be the fundamental difference between the networks, between the two models that they trained, that would because like letter recognition, you could think that it's not that different. Like when you train an algorithm, you can train the same model to recognize letters and to recognize objects. So what would be the fundamental difference that would make it that would show these very different results between the two tasks?
Okay, so that the main thing that they try to say is that the model trained on letters was trained only on letter categorization, and the model for object recognition was trained only on object categorization. So, but correlating the representational dissimilarity matrices for these two models. Well, at the end, the model for object categorization was more close to human behavior than the latter model. So I think that's the point they're trying to make.
Okay, yeah, so
I don't know if this makes sense.
yeah.
Because they say that actually both in the method, they explain that both the models actually perform quite well on latter categories.
I was about to ask, like, there are the differences in performance in recognizing the letters between the two models. Is you said it's very good in both cases, right?
Yeah, the performance of the model, I can find it now, but yeah, the performance of the models is in both cases, but basically ceiling effect. So it's almost perfect.
Because there was some evidence showing that the recognition of letters came from the region that was more specialized in recognizing faces. I saw a few papers about that. So that would go in there in that direction, saying that the networks in the brain that we use now to recognize letters are not specialized. They are it was recruited from a general purpose network before that we used before we had the writing, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think they make like the hypothesis of the fact that like letter experience in letter and reading should like stretch the vectors. If we imagine the response of an area of set of area in the brain space, this experience with letters should just stretch the vectors but not modify their direction. If we had to imagine the response of an area in terms of vector, for example. So it's basically the same features being used, but like more tuned to letters because of the extensive use we make of reading whatever is related. So about faces, I didn't know about this paper, so it seems very interesting. There are evidence related to this, for example, that behavior developmental evidences that like the faces recognitions became right lateralized after the acquisition of literacy. So it's like pushed on the right hemisphere, but because of another experience.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Annie?
Yeah, just a short follow-up on this. Did you say that both of the models performed at ceiling? So like very similar performance?
Yeah, it was very high performance, like more than 90%, I think. I remember.
Yeah, because then I'm wondering how informative it is, and maybe if there to further disentangle it in the future, if there was a more difficult task to actually show the difference in performance between the two, because if it's really both of them so similarly, I'm not sure what that says about the underlying hypothesis. Or what do you think?
I will look into it. That could be an idea. I think that the main point is that they didn't use actually it's not the performance of the network being correlated with the behavior. It's the dissimilarity matrices. So it's like the distance in each item presented to either humans or the neural network being compared. So it's like, for example, they use like for the, let's say, the visual search or the letter categorization task, they use like the reaction times in which, for example, let's say, of course, more similar letters are supposed to be more difficult to disentangle between. So if it takes more time to make the discrimination between two letters, then you're assuming that those two letters are more similar in terms of perception, and they use this kind of feature to correlate the behavior, the human and the machine, let's say, behavior. So maybe the actual performance of the network is not that much of a problem, or at least that was my understanding. Yet I'm not an expert on this, so I will look into it. Yes.
I have a question. So I just I didn't get the connection between neural networks and human behavior. So I mean, if we are getting the same result, it doesn't mean that the mechanisms that we are reaching to that point are the same. So how do they infer that, okay, if neural networks doing that way, then we are inferring something about human behavior?
Yeah, one of the claims they made is actually that, yes, the behavior, the way this neural network extract features, at least visual features, is probably similar to the way our cognitive system and neural system does. The point is, I think it's the contrast between the two networks, like the one trained on object and the one trained on letters. So what they are trying to prove is that a model trained on object recognition is more features that are more close to the human behavior than a model trained only on letters, even if the human behavior that you're measuring is letter recognition. So the way they are saying it's, look, those models are similar to the way we actually process information, visual information at least, is, oh, look, the features that this model can extract by its training, by virtue of its training, are quite well correlated by features extracted from a behavioral experiment with humans.
Yeah, that point, I don't get it. How do they know that the way network, object trained or letter trained network have the same features as humans using them when perceiving object or letter?
Oh, I think they are just inferring this because, of course, the only thing we have is correlation between features extracted by the networks and features extracted from human behaviors. In this case, it's just representational dissimilarity matrices. So we are assuming that these representational dissimilarity matrices have some meaning for the understanding of behavior and cognition, like. So it's not necessarily how the network works, because probably we don't even have a full understanding of this. But if we assume the features of the model in a dissimilarity matrix, and if we do the same for human behavior, then we obtain a certain correlation. So maybe we can assume or look further into it.
Okay. Chris? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's just to jump on this discussion. First, I think there's been a bunch of studies. Well, I mean, so the development of neural networks. It's not a coincidence that they are called neural networks. It's because basically both. The study of the brain influenced the development of machine learning models, and there's always been this hypothesis of because of course the neural networks are much simpler than a brain, but there's always been projects to try to simulate the brain with machine learning, because there is no other way that works anywhere close to what we know about the brain. So there's been always this kind of parallel development between the understanding of the brain and the development of machine learning, and I would say that this study is not assuming a bunch of things about how the brain works. I think it's a stone on the way to build a model of the brain, because it's just one potential evidence that the networks in the brain work in that way, in a more like general purpose network, like it shows with the object trained instead of just letter trained. So I don't think they claim that the brain is working like that and then they are showing a difference. I think it's the other way around, where they say we're not sure how similar the brain works to a neural network, but it seems to work more similarly to an object trained network than a letter trained network, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, that should be pretty much the message around behind this paper. So yes.
But another comment, like when we are presenting an object trained network, it contains the pictures much more information, I feel like, than letters. Do you think it can somehow influence the result? I mean, in a way, like the letters, it has just black color in the middle and a lot of white around, and objects, they are a lot of information. I don't know if that makes sense. If I don't know if a letter will be in the context of other colors around and things, maybe that network will be also, I don't know, I'm just speculating if that can influence the result.
Yeah, I thought about this as well, but first of all, they used a lot of different fonts and also handwriting to train the letter networks. So a lot of different stimuli. But another thing is that, yeah, letter are more simple maybe, but that should make the network probably like more efficient. Like it's an easier stimulus to process. So while if you have to like categorize objects, that's a lot of features you have to extract to carry out the task in a decent way. So,
but for neural network, less information you have, you will be less be able to generalize to other things, I guess. So maybe if the stimuli are very simple, then the output will be very simple of a network. I don't know. Because there are much more variability of the images, even though, yeah, they use different fonts and things, but there are much more features and variability within feature when you have objects. I don't know if you have any.
Again, I should dive a little bit more into the methodological details. But again, if you're interested in comparing the performance, I mean, the human subject were doing the same with the same stimulus for what concern letters. So you're pretty much comparing the same task with two different participants, I mean, a machine and humans. So maybe it's not a big deal, because I'm not interested in how the machine performs. Is actually, you are interested in how close is the performance of the machine, no matter the accuracy, say like this, to human. So even if the performance is perfect, you still, that would be still interesting.
No, okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Well, in that case, thank you, Eduardo, for presenting the paper and everyone for discussion. I wish you an exciting week in science and see you next week.